Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
All right, so Browns news has slowed down just a little bit here to where we ain't moving at a breakneck speed or anything like that. So the Browns have made a signing. They've made a couple of administrative moves, but nothing really too major, right? They've already kind of started not even started. They've completely laid the foundation for the rebuild of this offensive line, more aggressive than I thought Andrew Berry was going to be here. And this is another signing that is more in that kind of spirit. Jack Stoll, he's a kind of a journeyman, right? He was with Philadelphia for a long time, but now he's a veteran player. It seems like from his build, he is a blocking tight end. If you glance over his Pro Football Focus, it's a lot of pass blocking snaps. So, tight end 3 in competition to be tight end 3. I think this is more of a replacement for like Blake Whitehart than anything. But that's who the Browns are bringing in at tight end. Not really a giant deal here. Now we know that there's probably one more body to fill out that room, right? You got Harold Fannin, who's unquestionably going to be the starter there at tight end. And then Jack Stoll, who's probably going to be that third man in that rotation, the blocking tight end. And then you got to get somebody in there in the draft probably as your number 2 or somebody who can start at 3 and then move their way up the depth chart to 2 at some point during the season. Not a lot to say here about that signing. It is a pretty unremarkable signing, especially if you compare it to all the other moves that have been made for Cleveland. Another move that's been made by Cleveland is that the Browns the Browns tender on Ronnie Hickman became official. They just announced it. It was not a second round tender like it was initially reported. It is, and there's a specific word for it that I'm trying to find in the report for the type of tender. It's a first right of refusal tender. So not a second round tender. Previously with the second round tender, which would have been $5.8 million for this year, that would have meant that if a team chose to match that to sign Ronnie Hickman, that the Browns would get a second round pick in return for Ronnie Hickman. Since that's not what they did, they didn't do the second round tender. They just did the first refusal tender. That means if somebody matches Ronnie Hickman at $3.5 million, we get the first right to negotiate after that. It's kind of like restricted free agency on him. So that's what the tender is on Ronnie Hickman. We'll see if that's enough to keep him. I think they're pretty confident that that's going to be enough to keep him. And then that would mean he's back on about a $3.5 million deal, which would be a nice little upgrade for him as he awaits a much bigger payday once he hits unrestricted free agency. So that's the update on Ronnie Hickman. The tender did change. The Browns did not tender Mohamed Diabate, Sam Kamara, or Sam Webb, and Blake Whitehart. Diabate is the only one that surprises me. I thought they would bring back Mohamed Diabate. Sam Webb played good last year too. I thought that would be considered in that, but apparently not interested in doing that. In Browns news that's not Browns news, former Browns offensive tackle Jedric Wills signed a 1-year deal with the Chicago Bears. We'll see how that goes for Jed. He took a year off to heal from all of his injuries. It was questionable. It's weird that he had to do that because it was questionable whether he was injured enough to not play his last year in Cleveland. Like, that was a controversy. He sits out a whole year to heal from all of his lingering issues to play for the Chicago Bears. It's going to be interesting, him with Caleb Williams, because if you would have told me what tackle I would want to pair with Caleb Williams the least, it would probably be Jedric Wills, because Caleb Williams requires a tackle with a high motor that's not gonna like kind of let up. And we know that Jedric has a chronic issue when it comes to that. Joe Bitonio's contract details finally got announced, or at least leaked out. So it looks like they're just going to void the final year when his void year hits, which means that he's going to have about $23 million in dead cap for this year for the Cleveland Browns. And what this does lean towards is that Joe Bitonio is probably going to play somewhere else this year that's not Cleveland and hit the market. That's what my read is on it, because if Joe were retiring, I think he would have signed a 1-year extension, spread this $23 million out over the next 2 years so that the Browns are being hit with 10 this year, 13 next year. Since Joel didn't do that, I think that signals to me that Joel is probably looking at his options as far as playing this year, just not for the Cleveland Browns. And good for him. If I'm looking for immediately where I think Joel's going to go, I mean, he was a big supporter of Kevin Stefanski. I can easily see him going back to Kevin. I mean, he was Kevin's guy in that locker room. I don't know if there's a opening for him on that offensive line in Atlanta, but you could see the connection there with Kevin. There's a lot of different places that might need him. Maybe he's one of those guys who kind of doesn't sign with the team until July, or maybe even waits till during the season and then signs with the team that looks like they're on their way to a championship. If you're asking me what I hope for Joe Bitonio, is that I hope Joe goes to a team, if he does want to play this year, that can win a championship. I think his time was up in Cleveland. I'm not really upset that he's not coming back to Cleveland. I think it was time. I think we've moved past where he would be a fit for this offensive line. And honestly, the Browns just needed to move on at this point, right? They need to get younger on the offensive line. They need to move on from that era of the offensive line. And it's unfortunate because Joe Bitonio is also the last era, or the last player of that era of offensive line that was linked to Joe Thomas, right? The Browns are moving on entirely from that now. There's no connection to the Joe Thomas days on that offensive line. Joe was the last link to those days. So yeah, I think it's time for the Browns to move on. And honestly, Joe Bitonio's been here. He's done his duty as a member of the Cleveland Browns. He's been through a lot. I would love to see him go somewhere where he has a chance to, play multiple playoff games and win a Super Bowl. You know what I mean? I want that for Joel. He's obviously not going to get that in Cleveland this year. That's not the goal here. Well, that's not the hopes here for this team this year. So that being the case, if Joel can go somewhere where he can possibly win a championship, I'm all for it. I hope Joe does that, and I hope he takes whatever path can get him to that, whether that's signing with somebody immediately, waiting till July, or even just being a street free agent in the middle of the year. I think that can all serve him if somebody pops up with an injury. Let's say the Seahawks pop up, they have an injury, they sign Joe Bitonio, good for him. Want him to win the Super Bowl, want him to achieve all the things in his career that he deserved after doing so much time here in Cleveland. So that's kind of the news for the Cleveland Browns from yesterday. Nothing too crazy. Honestly, what I want to spend the end of this video talking about is giving some praise to Andrew Berry for the aggressiveness on the offensive line, right? This was a question about just how aggressive the Browns would be when it comes to the offensive line. Andrew certainly had his naysayers about whether he would go and be aggressive towards the offensive line. And I think a lot of people deserve to. Well, I think a lot of people need to give him his respect, right? He said he was going to go crazy for the offensive line in free agency. And you cannot deny that what he did in free agency was aggressive towards the offensive line and addressed a lot of different issues. Even the most bad faith critic of Andrew Berry has to admit that the Browns, they went after their problems on the offensive line and got better from where they were last year. And that was something that people were critical of Andrew Berry's willingness to do, not even like his ability, just willingness to do. A lot of people didn't think that he would go after the offensive line in the way that he did. And I just want to give him some credit there for going hard the offensive line, because again, if you look at it, the Browns have pretty much filled every hole on that offensive line. They have a center situation that they feel fine with. You know, you're probably going to go with Luke Whippler and then a rookie that you draft in the 3rd or 4th round. So let's say Sam Heck, have those two compete. Best man wins. You feel good about that center position. Then you look at guard, Elgin Jenkins at right guard or left guard. And then you have Zion Johnson at right or left guard. You got Titus Howard at right tackle. And then, you know, if you want to, you can complete the whole infinity set and get Monroe Freeling at left tackle in the draft and just, boom, rebuilt this offensive line. You know, credit to him. And he's done it with good value on these contracts, right? $12 million a year for a 2-time Pro Bowl guard / center in Elgin Jenkins. And then you can just cheaply handle center with draft picks and what's on your roster. Zion was a little expensive for him, right? $15 million, but he's 26 years old. He's a former 1st-round pick. He might be a long-term solution, and if he does make the improvement that they're hoping that he can make, then that $15 million is going to sound like a pretty good deal in a year or two. Titus Howard getting a starting tackle under $20 million, really nice. Like, that's less than what people were saying that Rashad was going to get, and, you know, Rasheed Walker, was going to get. And, you know, he's a better player than Rasheed Walker, so you feel good about that as well. And he's under 30. So you were able to kind of good value. A lot of different guys. Was able to bring back Tevin Jenkins to be able to fight out for a role here, or maybe even be a backup, a high-level backup. That's really good. I feel really good about the aggressiveness and the approach towards the offensive line. They still got some work to do at wide receiver for sure. I don't know how aggressive they're going to be at wide receiver. I talked about that in my previous video. Does the timeline at quarterback match up with being super aggressive at wide receiver this offseason? I'm not 100% sure. It's real easy to be critical of Andrew Berry or the Browns when they're doing stuff that you don't agree with or you don't align with. But hey, you got to give them the credit when they are doing things. I talked about it all offseason. The most important, I was on UCSS last week. They asked me, what's the most important thing to build for the Cleveland Browns this offseason? I said the offensive line. So I appreciate this approach that the Browns are serious about rebuilding those trenches. And that makes me feel a lot better about the team building philosophy that is guiding the rebuilding of this team. You know, if they were going for flashy parts and trying to get a big name wide receiver to try to fix this offense, that wouldn't bode well to me. We saw that fail with John Dorsey when he tried to just duct tape Odell Beckham over all the Browns' offensive issues. It wasn't until Andrew Berry got here and built out the offensive line in 2020 and actually invested in developing some of the guys that were on the roster that the team actually won games. You know, like, that's where games are won. The trenches matter, and I'm happy that the Browns are attacking the trenches. With that all being said, I want to thank you guys for watching this video. Everybody have a good day and an even better night.